Hey there, welcome back to another video with the Math Doc. We are continuing on our journey with linear equations. In the descriptions below, there are links to the several videos we already posted on linear equations, how we solve them, multi-step and two-step equations, and actually what an equation actually is. If you're new to this channel, please check out those videos and of course subscribe. So in this video, we will focus only on word problems. We will look at two examples where we will write a model, and where we will write a model, that will be our first step, and we will discuss how to do that. We will identify our variables, what is known and what the question is, and using that we will translate our word problem into a mathematical expression with an equality sign, which will help us in taking the next step, which will be to solve. So we will simplify our equation using the various properties such as distributive and commutative properties, and we will use the equality properties of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division in order to solve. Once we solve, we will also check our results to make sure that they are correct. We will first substitute our result in the equation. That is one step. So in order to check that we solve the equation correctly, we substitute. But then, because these are real world problems, we can actually look at the result and ask ourselves if it makes sense. If we were supposed to figure out the average height of a class, well, if we get a negative number, then obviously that is not good. Or if we had to calculate what the average weight of a car is, and we got something like 2 ounces, we know that too is not correct. So we will use our results to check that we built our model correctly and that we solved our equation correctly. So let's start looking at our first problem, and I included both problems here, but we will work with each one of them separately, obviously. So let's get started with our first problem here. So a minivan will get 20 miles per gallon of gasoline on the freeway. The minivan tank can hold 18 gallons when completely full. You fill up the tank and drive from Los Angeles to Santa Barbara and arrive with 10 gallons remaining. How many miles did you drive? How much will you have left if you were to drive 100 miles or 200 miles? Okay, so let's first of all highlight everything we know about this problem. So we know that we can get 20 miles per gallon, okay? We also know that the minivan tank can hold 18 gallons right here. We fill up the tank and we drive, and we arrive with 10 gallons remaining. Okay, how many miles did we drive? That is our question. So the question is, how many miles did we drive? And so that is an indication of what our variable should be. Our variable x should be the number of miles, right, that we drove. Okay, so that is our variable. What do we know? We know that we arrived with 10 gallons and we started with 18 gallons. So it looks like our equation should have the form total gallons minus number of gallons used equals the remaining gallons, which are 10. So the total gallons were 18, we remain with 10, and we used a certain amount. How can we figure out how much we used? Well, that comes from this piece of information, right? The 20 miles per gallon. Now, our variable x is the number of miles. So we really want to write this piece of information in terms of miles, not in terms of gallons. How do we do that? If we look at this, let's write it out again. We have 20 miles per gallon. This is a wordy way of writing out a ratio. For every 20 miles, we have 1 gallon, right? Now, if you recall, when we have ratios, one of the things we're allowed to do to them is we're allowed to divide or multiply by the same number, both sides of the ratio. So let's divide by 20 here. If we divide both sides by 20, we get 20 miles, divide by 20, ratio to 1 gallon, divide by 20. Now on this left-hand side, the 20 in the denominator and the multiplying 20 cancel, right? And we get 1 mile on this side. 1 mile per 1 over 20, okay, or 1/20th of a gallon. So now we know that we get 1 mile per 1 over 20 gallon of gas. Okay, so let's go back to our equation. We wanted to write the total number of gallons minus the number of gallons used equals what remains. Okay, so we had 18, we started with 18, minus the number of miles we took, times the amount of gas we used per each mile. That is exactly 1 over 20, right? That should equal the remainder, which is 10 gallons. So we have 18 gallons here, 10 gallons here, and here we have miles times gallons per mile. Okay, so in terms of the units, we're doing okay. Let's write this out again. 18 minus x times 1 over 20 equals 10. This is our equation. How do we solve this equation? Well, let's use our properties. Our first property is the addition property. Okay, so with the addition property, let's add x times 1 over 20 to both sides of this equality. So we get 18 minus x over 20 plus x over 20 equals 10 plus x over 20. So now these two items cancel each other, right? These two elements are equal, but one is negative, so they cancel, and we have 18 equals 10 plus x over 20. Okay, let's write that out straight. Okay, now we can use our subtraction property in order to move our 10 to the other side. So let's subtract 10 from both sides of this equality, and we get 18 minus 10 is 8, and 10 minus 10 is 0, equals x over 20. And finally, we can use our multiplication property in order to isolate our variable x. Let's multiply both sides by 20. And I'm using the dot multiplication symbol. 8 times 20 equals x over 20 times 20. So on the left we have 160, and on the right we have x times 20 divided by 20, so we have exactly x, and x is 160. Okay, so this is our result, and again, because let's look back at the units of this equation. We wrote it out in terms of, here we are, in terms of gallons here and miles here. So x is miles, so x is 160 miles. Okay, so that is our result. Now we should check this by substitution. So our equation was 18 minus x times 1 over 20 equals 10. Okay, so now let's substitute 160 there. We have 18 minus 160 times 1 over 20 equals 10. This is an improper fraction. Let's write it out. 18 minus 160 divided by 20 equals 10. What is 160 divided by 20? It's exactly 8, because 8 times 20 is 160. So we have 18 minus 8 equals 10, or 10 equals 10. So that is correct. So we did get the right answer, or the right result for the equation. Let's also look at this number. Does it make sense? 160 miles between cities, between LA and Santa Barbara. That seems to make sense. So I think this result looks good and we can trust it. So that was our first problem, and the main complication in this problem really was going from the miles per gallon here, this step, to the miles, to a single mile per 1 over 20th of a gallon. So that was our major complication in this model here. Let's go back to our second problem, and let's use the red again to highlight the information in this problem so that we can build a model and solve it. Okay, so a bookshop owner can sell a math textbook for $48. He pays the publisher $36 for each book he sells, and a flat shipping fee of $120 per order. How many books does he have to order and sell if he wants to make a total of $600? How much will he make if he sells 100 books or 200 books? Okay, so let's look again and highlight what we know. So he will sell the math textbook for $48, and he pays the publisher $36 for each book. He also has to pay a flat fee for shipping for each order. So how many books does he have to order and sell if he wants to make a total of $600? Well, the question here was how many books. So again, our variable this time, x, is the number of books. Okay, so let's figure out what kind of model we can write. We want to see how much he is going to earn, right? And let's say we know that he wants to earn $600. So let's write that out. 600 equals, okay, so what does it equal? Well, it'll equal the number of books that he sells times their price, right? Which is 48. But from that, we have to subtract the amount he paid the publisher. What does he pay the publisher? He paid the publisher $36 for each book, so that's x times 36. But he also paid the publisher $120 for shipping. So here we are with our equation. He would like to make 600. He will make that by selling x books, that's the number of books, but he also has to make sure that he takes into account what he's paid the publisher for the books. Okay, so let's go ahead and solve this, this equation. So our first step will be to combine like terms. That's one of the things that simplifies our equation. We have two terms with the variable x. We have x times 48 and x times 36, and there's a minus between them. So let's write that out. We have 600 on the left, and now we have x times, and let's open parentheses, 48 minus 36. Okay, what we've done here is we've basically used the distributive property for multiplication of parentheses, right? Because if we look at this let me just write out the full equation, minus 120 here for the shipping. If we look at this, we have x times 48 right here minus x times 36. That is exactly the distributive property. Because x is the same, right? This x that multiplies 48 and the x that multiplies 36 is the same x. We don't know what this number is, but we do know that it is the same number. We will order and sell the same number of books. So we can take this x and put it outside of the parentheses using the distributive property. Okay, so let's simplify a little bit more. We have 600 equals x times, and 48 minus 36 is 12. So let's just write 12 minus 120. Our next step will be to use the addition property, and we will add 120 to both sides because our goal is to isolate x. That's how we solve for x. So let's add 120 to this side and to this side here. And here we get 720, right? 600 plus 120 equals x times 12 plus 0 because these two cancel. Okay, one more step. Let's use the division property and divide both sides by 12, right? We will divide both sides by 12 just by writing the fraction line. Okay, so we have 720 divided by 12 equals x times 12 divided by 12. Those two cancel. What is 720 divided by 12? Well, 12 goes into 72 6 times. 6 times 12 is 72, and we get 1 0 here, and so that equals 60. So this equals 60 equals x. So our result is that x equals 60. Again, x is the number of books. So he will order 60 books. Let's check our result. Let's go back and look at our equation. What was our equation? Our equation was it's right here. 600 equals x times 48 minus x times 36 minus 120. So 600 minus equals x times 48 minus x times 36 minus 120. What we have to do is multiply. 600 equals 60 times 48 minus 60 times 36 minus 120. And if you go through this exactly, you will find that 600 equals 600, but I won't take your time and do that. And so our result is correct. Let's also look at how realistic this result is. We said that he should order 60 books. And that makes sense. 60 books is a reasonable number of books to order for a class or for a grade year. And so this makes sense. And if he will order these books, he will make $600. Okay, so we solved both problems, and again, if any of this was not clear, you can go back to the other videos and check them out, because we work out some of these similar examples in the earlier videos. Please return for the next word problems. They will get progressively a little more complicated, but mostly we will practice the same properties so that they become second nature to you. Thank you again for joining me. If you're new, please subscribe, like the video. If you have comments or questions, please include those below and I'll be happy to respond. See you next time.